All right, welcome to Ivory GC. Today we are joined by Leslie Cornell, General Counsel and Chief Compliance Officer at Social Finance, a national nonprofit driving innovative financing solutions to address critical social challenges. Leslie's legal career spans public finance, social impact bonds, and large-scale public-private partnerships aimed at delivering measurable outcomes for communities. She also teaches at Georgetown Law, where she shares her expertise on impact investing and social finance models. And in this episode, we will explore Leslie's path into mission-driven legal work, how she navigates legal strategy in the nonprofit finance world, and what it takes to lead legal in an organization focused on systemic social change. Leslie, welcome to Ivory GC. It's great to have you.
Great to be here.
So let's start with what you're up to. Tell us a little bit about social finance, your role there, and then we'll go from there.
I would love to. So as you said, I'm the General Counsel and Chief Compliance Officer. Social Finance is an impact finance nonprofit and a registered investment advisor, hence the need for a CCO. We basically build innovative partnerships and mobilize capitals that drive social progress. So fundamentally, our charitable purpose is about systems change and bringing the right type of capital together to address a given social challenge. And it's very hard to describe our work without concrete examples. So I'll try to go into a little bit.
Can you provide us with one?
I'll give you a little bit. Yeah, a little bit. Especially we have like 3 big portfolios that we work across right now. And the reason it's hard to describe our work without examples is because we work across sectors, we work across issue areas, and we blend different types of capital to achieve hopefully measurable impact. That is our goal. So those 3 larger portfolios right now are our workforce and education investments portfolio. The goal of that work is really to help people upskill for in-demand jobs without taking on unaffordable debt. And the model that we use for that is outcomes-based financing or outcomes-based contracts, where learners only repay on that loan or that income share agreement or that instrument if they actually succeed, meaning that they find a job that is paying them a higher income than they had previously. That portfolio is $250 million across all kinds of sectors: healthcare, IT, skilled trades, climate, and it's also geographically diverse. We have programs across the country. Our second portfolio is an impact-first investing advisory and fund management business. The goal of that work is to make impact-first investing accessible to philanthropists, including private foundations or community foundations or donor-advised funds. DAFs, I will probably say DAFs on accident during the course of this conversation, donor-advised funds. And we do that through investment advisory and consulting work, and we also manage an impact-first fund of funds. The charitable focus of the fund, for example, spans affordable housing, clean energy, rural development, economic mobility. So again, we're really working across a number of sectors. And then finally, we have our public sector advisory practice, which is we're essentially trying to help governments be more effective and responsive. And that happens through contracts that focus on outcomes. So emphasizing adaptation over compliance, tying spending to results, helping governments form meaningful partnerships through money and data sharing across like agencies, jurisdictions, sectors, and helping kind of try to increase public sector effectiveness overall. So we tend to look at that through contracting design and better data.
That's interesting. I mean, it's very, it sounds very complicated, also very interesting. It'd be great to hear some of the examples of investment projects that you guys have worked on.
Yeah.
Why don't you start? Take us there. Why don't you take us there next? Can you tell us a little bit about maybe an example project that you've the company's taken on?
Yeah, happy to. So one great example under our workforce and investments portfolio is we recently, we launched last year, actually, about a year ago, the Renew Fund, which is the Reinvesting in Nursing Education and Workforce Fund. So that's one of our national and scale workforce and education programs. What it means is we call it a pay it forward fund. That's the tool that we use. And that pay it forward fund model essentially is the outcomes-based financing loan in this construct. So it's a 0% interest loan that students are able to take out to finish their last 2 years of their nursing program. And once they are completing their program and they have a 0% interest loan that they use to pay us back, that goes into a giant pool that we're managing, and we're able to recycle those repayments in order to issue new loans to incoming students that are looking to enter their last 2 years of nursing workforce. The really interesting part about the Renew Fund is that it's an employer repayment model as well. So we've also brought in hospitals and healthcare systems that we're facing a very significant nursing shortage, and they are looking to tap pipelines of talent, especially talent that has otherwise been not able to access the training that they need to become registered nurses. So that employer repayment system allows us to utilize employers and the training provider, which is Western Governors University, is our primary training provider. It's a national university that trains nurses all across the country. Then nurses who otherwise would have real difficulty accessing or completing their nursing program due to financial barriers and many other things that get in the way of that completion. Finish their programming. They have their loan with us at 0%. So it's student friendly and it's income based, meaning that if they don't find a job with one of our employer partners or someone else earning above $60,000 a year, they don't have to repay on that loan until they surpass that threshold.
Interesting. And so how did you get into this space? Tell us a little bit about your background, your experience, and we'll go from there.
Yeah. Well, I went to law school originally, because I wanted to work in impact or something that served others. I really thought that would be work in the public sector originally. Someday, maybe, hopefully I'll go back to the public sector, but the call of big law out of law school was meaningful. And that's really what led me to finance. And that might be the most surprising pivot of my career, is that I ended up in finance. Public finance was my background. I spent 5 years as a conduit tax exempt bond counsel at Chapman and Cutler in Chicago. And it was really the moment. There's a lot of things that brought me to the impact finance space, but connecting finance to impact was like the real turning point for me. I remember when I first heard the term impact investor, and it very quickly became the career path that I knew I wanted to pursue. So the opportunity to do impact finance full-time at Social Finance was presented to me pretty early, and it was very unique at the time to work full-time in this space as an attorney. So I picked up my life and I moved from Chicago to Boston to take advantage of that over 8 years ago.
Nice. And so did you go right from big law to social finance, or were you
I did.
Okay.
I did.
Okay.
I was so Chapman and Cutler to social finance in Boston. Since living in Boston, I moved to Boston for social finance about 8 years ago. But since then, I've actually worked across many of our offices. So I've been in our Austin, Texas office, our San Francisco office, and I'm now currently based in our DC offices. So they've taken me across the country and doing this like impact finance.
So talk a little bit about your team or the company, how many employees and how many are in the legal and compliance function.
Yeah, so social finance, and that's a great point. Social finance is 120, 130 people organization right now. We're across all of those offices plus New York, the one office I haven't hit yet. And we have a team of 5 lawyers currently, or a legal team of 4 full-time lawyers. And when I joined social finance, it was really in startup mode. So there was only about 40 people, and I was the second legal hire. And that was really meaningful to me to be able to really see this organization through all of its growth and stages, and allowed me to have like a real institutional knowledge that I think is particularly useful.
Yeah. And so talk a little bit about how the legal function has matured. I mean, you've been instrumental in the development over time. Where did you start, and what how have you developed along the way?
Yeah, like I said, I was the second legal hire, so just me under the GC originally. And what that meant is when I started and we were 40 people and it was in startup mode, I kind of dove into everything, and you had your hands kind of across the different pieces, from operations to corporate work, and obviously deal work. We are deal lawyers at Social Finance, and I will happy to get more into that, but that is like where all of us really come from, and that's what we spend a lot of our time on day to day. But you work on everything when you're in a place that small and you're doing like startups type mode. You kind of jump into everything. What's really interesting about the evolution that I've had at Social Finance is I started doing all of that. I was really a generalist. I worked across anything and everything that people had. As social finance grew and we developed and we added more people to our legal team, my role became more specialized and specific. I developed, I really developed expertise and went and worked on our fund formation work, our debt finance, that work that was all about the deals that we were trying to close. And I got more specialized for a while. And now as general counsel, I'm kind of back out to being a generalist and focusing across the organization, having to look big picture. So I like to really get my hands into the weeds sometimes, but I also really rely heavily on my team for that issue area expertise and that day-to-day management of like all of the projects that we're working on. So shout out to Tyler, Kiara, Ivy, and Jaquila for being our issue area experts as well as generalists still.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. And so, as you mentioned, your team is made up of deal lawyers. Talk to us about what those deals look like. What skill sets are particularly important at social finance?
Yeah, so all of our lawyers really, like I said, came from big law backgrounds, project finance or debt finance, or really like commercial financing backgrounds, mortgage-backed securities. We got someone. So, and I think what's really interesting is they're using that work that they knew and that expertise day to day in what we're doing now. So the types of financings, I mean, we have fund formation, we have fund management, we have debt that we're taking in all the time in order to facilitate our fund, like our pay it forward fund, the renew fund that I mentioned. That's a philanthropic capital fund. So we take in capital in the form of PRIs. We have folks that came into our team from all kinds of backgrounds. They're all from big law, debt finance, mortgage-backed securities. And that expertise they're really using day to day in their work. Across our work, we have fund formation. We're creating philanthropic pooled capital funds, debt finance funds. We have some equity vehicles. So really all of the types of like kind of corporate financing vehicles that you can work across, we do work within, which is why I think we need the technical expertise that comes from people who got trained in big law. That's an important component to being able to execute at a high level for an in-house team. Yeah. But we also are doing all of that with a very different mission and end goal of those financings. And so it's an important mind shift that needs to happen when people come in to our legal team and start thinking about how to apply all the expertise and knowledge they have towards a new goal.
So what have you used outside counsel for? How do you kind of divvy up the work between in-house counsel and outside counsel?
Yeah. So our primary outside counsel is Chapman and Cutler. Thank you, Chapman and Cutler. And we really especially rely on them for fund formation work. That is just such a fast moving and evolving market that you really need to understand what's currently market in terms and how people are negotiating and what new things are happening at any given moment with securities law and regulations. Yeah. So we use them primarily for that, but they also advise us across a range of, our tax exempt work, our other funds, regulatory investigations and things when those come up, sure. And also helped us become registered investment advisors. And so that is our primary use. We occasionally work with other specialized outside counsel when we are encountering maybe IP issues or litigation or data security and privacy was another one that we recently used outside counsel for. But we actually really like I really like our team to rely on our in-house team as much as possible. And that's not just for cutting costs and things like that, which it of course is useful for, but it's also for there aren't that many people who are experts in impact finance. It is difficult to take all of these commercial concepts and funnel them towards mission-driven purpose. And so we're the ones that know that, and we're the experts in that. So I want to make sure that we're maintaining that lens across all of the work that we're doing.
Got it. So starting your legal career in public finance at Chapman and Cutler, what lessons did you take from that experience that still shape your approach today?
Yeah, well, like I said, we're deal lawyers, so I really needed that deal experience in order to be able to execute what we're doing today. And I wouldn't be able to be an effective GC at social finance if I didn't understand how to negotiate, structure, and close a financing. Like it is fundamental to so much of what we do. But the biggest takeaways that I think that I have that are really fundamental to all the work you do that you learn when you're a transactional deal lawyer is setting up a process, setting up a timeline and a checklist that keeps momentum moving forward. And that's important across so much work. the other thing is collaboration. Transactional lawyers, deal lawyers are working across and with and against at the same time all of the partners around the table trying to get a deal done. And that relationship management piece was incredibly important to my education, and I learned that at Chapman and Cutler, working around the table with people, basic understanding what your needs are or what your clients' needs are, thinking broadly about how that can be achieved so that you can go into a negotiation as a problem solver, and then like you're bringing respect and authority and firmness to the negotiation, but also you're going to see those people again, and you're all working towards the same end goal. So it's so important to approach everything with the right mindset and camaraderie, even to know that we might not agree on this, or we might have really opposing views, but at the end of the day we're trying to make the same thing happen, so we need to be in problem solving mindset.
So what inspired your move to social finance, and how has your role evolved since joining the organization?
I think I said, I remember when I first heard the term impact investor, I knew that utilizing the finance background that I was really drawn to, surprisingly for me, because of its complexity, because it gets deeply complex and technical, and you need a lot of expertise in that realm of law.
Yeah.
And being able to take that but apply it in an impact context, in a charitable context, was very meaningful to me. It struck me as like exactly how I wanted to apply the experience and knowledge that I'd been collecting. So again, social finance was just a very unique opportunity. I'm really proud of how much the space has grown since I joined social finance 8 years ago. There's actually, a relatively much larger number of roles in impact finance and impact investing full-time for lawyers now. And it's really exciting to see that growth and to see those other opportunities come up for people who are interested in the space, because that wasn't, when I was looking at it 10 years ago, it didn't exist. And so social finance was a special, unique opportunity that I jumped on when the opportunity presented itself.
So as general counsel and chief compliance officer, how do you balance risk management with the organization's mission to innovate and drive social change?
So we're pushing boundaries for sure. We're not a traditional direct services nonprofit. We're not even a traditional earned revenue nonprofit.
Yeah.
And we work deeply with both the government sector, but ask the government to act in different ways than it's traditionally done. And we're working closely with the private sector and investors and acting them to think and act in different ways than they have traditionally done.
Yeah.
So one thing that's really interesting about that and our role as often an intermediary or an advisor is that we're coaching a lot of our partners in risk management, not in the sense of providing legal advice, obviously, but in the sense that we're advising the deal. We're responsible for momentum and for raising issues. And we're the partner that everyone looks to be the first to problem solve on those issues because of our role in facilitating and building these transactions. So I don't know if I think of risk management like as a balance per se. It's like a pulse, right? It's always there. Sometimes it's stronger and louder. Sometimes it's quieter to make room for something else that needs to be front and center. But our purpose is to have impact and make change. And that's the primary consideration, which is actually really helpful as a North Star to focus on. Risk matters to the extent that it gets in the way of making change. So I think of risk less as what could go wrong, although I obviously have to think of that too, but not just as what could go wrong, but what could keep us from doing what's right. What could prevent us from doing the thing that's going to have impact?
And so social finance works with government agencies, investors, and service providers. How do you manage the legal complexities of working across such diverse stakeholder groups?
Yeah, it's a tricky bunch because they all have very different goals, constraints, things that they're working on.
Yeah.
It's so important to know your partners, and not just like as a sector, which I know a lot more now about each of these sectors and the kind of constraints that they're generally operating under, but you have to get to know each partner a little bit individually in order to understand what their objectives are and how they want to go about it, their approach, and what's going to keep them from being able to execute on a transaction or a deal. So governments, for example, have real statutory actual constraints about how they can spend money. And in general, risks aren't rewarded, especially at the local or state or county level, which is what we're often working with. And investors have incredibly complex diligence and investment processes. They're not designed for impact investments, not just because they could, like our investments could be below market rate, which they can be, don't have to be, but because you're also assessing something else and trying to define and measure impact. And it's just not as straightforward when you're talking to someone who's very used to thinking about only return seeking investments. It's an education process that we're introducing a lot of investors to, talking about what kind of impact we can have, how we're going to measure it, how we're going to show that it happened at the end of the day.
So what are some unique regulatory or legal challenges you encounter in structuring outcome-based financial models?
Yeah, good question. I mean, what aren't unique legal questions? Every time that it's something presented, it's a little bit unique. I will say one thing that I think a lot about is just because something does good and has impact doesn't mean that it qualifies as charitable under tax law. That's one of those areas where legal nuance really matters in how we design our work and how we talk about it and what we say is the mission and purpose of all of our activities. Securities and advisor regs, Investment Company Act and so forth, are difficult to navigate when your primary purpose isn't profit seeking. Those they just aren't written for that. So there's some navigating and figuring out what are they trying to accomplish with this so that we can be as compliant as possible given our model and our mission. And then I think the last thing, we just work in a gray space a lot. So there are a lot of those smaller issues that are interesting when we approach them. So for example, early on, we used income share agreements, which are student-friendly risk sharing contracts that were not technically loans. And they operated in this gray space where they did not fit in the state definition or even the federal definition of a loan. But states did eventually start treating them like they were loans anyway, which taught me that being legally right isn't necessarily the same thing as being regulator proof, right? You have to sometimes adapt the work so that you can continue doing the work, even if the original logic was sound. It doesn't matter. You need to move on. It's a waste of people's time to focus on how right you were. You have to adapt to do the impact. And it takes time for innovative things to settle into regulatory regimes. So when you have a new tool and a new product, it might not fit easily in one of the categories that people are used to talking about. So you have to move forward anyway.
So impact finance is still a growing and evolving field. How do you approach legal issues when you're working on first of their kind transactions?
I think being curious is really important.
Yeah.
Seeing the forest for the trees. We might not spot every issue, even when we have additional outside expertise. I mean, experts in particular have tunnel vision. And so unless you're going to consult experts across just the range of possible impacts, it becomes about prioritizing what could have an impact that would fundamentally put this project or this deal or this impact at risk.
Yeah.
And so my job really, I don't feel like it's to be an expert on everything. It's to apply consistent rationale across new information, to try to be thoughtful and think big picture and make sure that we're taking, calibrating that appropriately. But again, when facts change, you have to evolve. You don't waste time proving a point that nobody cares about.
How do you lead and mentor your legal team when they're navigating novel legal questions with no clear precedent?
Oh man, my legal team is really excellent. So hiring really great people is the first and foremost thing.
Yeah.
So I think that it's also about being accessible to them. So providing open and trusting relationships with my team is very important to me. Making sure that they know that I'm there to support what they're looking for, but also I'm available whenever they want to just talk through an issue so that we can kind of come up with the option set of what might be the best to pursue. So I think you have to have a lot of deferring to your team when they're closer to the issue and they know what the constraints have been, how we got to this place, what's been the challenges up to this point. There's a lot of deference, but there's also just I think a willingness to show humility and openness and transparency that we're going to get it wrong occasionally, and we just need to course correct when we can.
Yeah.
I think those are the ways to build a team that is empowered to do a lot of good work, but wants to check in, wants to be creative and problem solve as a team, because they know that that results in the best outcomes and ideas and solutions.
Yeah, often this is making sure that the right or a sound analytical process was followed. You know, you're probing to make sure that the right things were thought about. We've kind of considered the various implications and factors that come into play when making the decision, and as long as you're comfortable that the right decision process has been made, that can make a big difference too.
Yeah, it's so helpful to ask. Like, I've had to train myself a little bit on this, but to ask questions first. Like, so
Yeah.
why do you think? What's your? It's first of all, it's important to have them come to you with like proposed solutions, right? Like that should be an expectation. But then why? Tell me why you think this is right, and
Right.
we can validate that, and that's an easier, more efficient process
Yeah.
than
Yeah.
you coming to me having to catch me up from months of what might be
Right.
back and forth with a partner. Yeah.
Right. Right. So in your experience, how do you build a legal function that both protects the organization and enables it to push boundaries?
So, I mean, you can't eliminate risk in full, right?
Yeah.
We're not here to preserve a perfect risk profile. We're here to get capital moving towards measurable outcomes. So the real risk oftentimes is paralysis. If we over-engineer protections and stall innovation, we've failed before we've started. And that is something that I'm constantly thinking about. And I don't want our legal team to be thought of as a legal team that is going to stall or reduce momentum. And in fact, being a momentum builder is incredibly important to how I think about building our team. Doesn't mean that things don't get slowed down sometimes when we're going through a really complex, long review, but it does mean that we come out with action items. Here's the next steps. Here's what you need in order for us to move one step closer to closing this transaction, launching this deal, launching this project, and actually meeting people and the needs that we're trying to meet at the base level. So the way that I accomplish that, which I think is the actual question that you asked, is working really closely with our project teams. And I say project teams, business teams. I mean, we integrate with our teams. My team will join weekly project team calls. They are in the Slack channels. They are talking to those teams every single day. And it's so important to be that in the weeds, I think, as these new innovative structures are getting built. It's so much easier to make tweaks to the route as you go than to have to slap a big red flag on something when it's almost at the finish line.
Yeah.
So it's working with teams and really creating that partnership mentality. My teams know I really value close partnerships with the business. The best feedback that we can get as a team is that our business teams, our business leads value us as thought partners and strategic partners. They want more time with us than we have bandwidth to give. That's a balance overall, but that's what I want to hear, is that they're looking for it because they know we provide value, and you have to have that really close relationship, I think, to build that.
So how has your teaching experience at Georgetown shaped your leadership style or your approach to mentoring young lawyers?
Yeah, well, teaching has helped me in so many ways. It helps me articulate ideas that I usually shortcut through like either instinct or maybe laziness. It makes it makes the basics that you gloss over, that you already know so well, you have to spell them out, you have to articulate them. And that takes on then so much more weight in that context. And when you have that basis, it gives you so much better insights when you're making more nuanced decisions down the road, just to really have that fundamental so locked in that you can articulate why something exists in the first place, so you know what the nuance which direction the nuance needs to go, essentially. So articulating things in new ways has absolutely helped me. It also forces me to distill what actually matters, and I think that's a great practice for thinking about how I mentor my team or talk and onboard new folks to our teams. But I try to be big picture first. In the classroom, I want to give an understanding of the context of our space of impact investing, social entrepreneurship, the field of trying to do good with law as a whole. We start my class actually with a philosophical exercise by asking who's responsible for solving social challenges, who's responsible for what sector private, government, or social? I don't know. Do you have an opinion? Which sector is responsible for
It's
solving
interesting. I
social
think
problems?
it would, my initial impression is it's a little bit of each, and what's each sector's role in that, and how do they all kind of come together to round something out that makes sense. But I'd probably lean towards the public sector,
Yeah.
because it's in this democratic society that we're in, where it's the government that's looking after we the people, and so that's where I'd lean. But each sector has a role to play.
Yeah, a public sector is a pretty common one. But it's what's really interesting is that when you dive into it with students, the answer, what constraints and opportunities each sector has
Yeah,
to are and what primes each of them to solve or not to be able to solve those social problems is such an interesting place to start. And I really
yeah,
think that view is important for like general counsel work as well. Why are we doing this project or this plan or setting up this rule or this policy? What do we want from it? Right? What are we
yeah,
actually trying to achieve? So you have to start, I think, from that big picture, and then you can go down to, yes, this rep that we could get from a partner is market, and we should be able to ask for it. But is it important to us now in this
right,
context? Why? And I
right.
think you really need that lens to calibrate risk and move deals and have momentum, like we've been talking about.
So, as your parting words on the episode, what advice would you give to rising lawyers that want to fill your shoes one day?
I think I think what would have surprised me, but has been absolutely key, like I said, is going into finance. And it's not, I am not recommending that everyone go into finance. What I think it's evidence of is that there's many paths to mission-driven work.
Yeah,
And you should use what interests you most, what your strengths are, and any experience that you can gather and use that to pivot towards mission and impact. I mean, all law is impact law. So if you find a specialty that you like and you can excel in, you can pivot that towards impact. And then I guess my other big piece of advice is to find the other lawyers or other people who are doing the work that you find compelling and interesting, and follow them or talk to them. They almost all, legal work is niche, and there's so many small groups of people doing really incredible work that if you just can get into those groups and those spaces, you'll learn so much about the opportunity set that's available to you for moving in your career. So for me, that's been the Grunin Conference of Impact Investing and Social Entrepreneurship that's held at NYU every year, the Impact Investing Legal Working Group, which is actually how I very first heard of social finance, and most recently, the Global Alliance of Impact Lawyers, which I am on the North America Regional Board for. But those are just all such good opportunities to get invited to the space, get invited to
yeah.
the conversation, and learn more.
Well, thank you so much for being here. It was a pleasure to hear about your career, your the company that you're with now, and your trajectory. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, I thank you. Thank you very much. It was very, very good of you to have me.